Hello guys, this is my second part for the muscles, and this is when like the gym bro part of me is gonna come out, because this is all like how does this matter, you know? And so let's talk about what happens with some kind of poisons. Well, this doesn't really have any connection to the gym bro part of me, but or maybe it does, I don't know. But let's talk about organophosphates, or also known as insecticides. So what this does is gonna block ACHE. And so what this means is that if we're going to look back here, if we're blocking ACHE, that means there's going to be constant acetylcholine, which means your muscle is going to be constantly stimulated. So what this does is you're going to die from exhaustion. Die from constant stimulation of muscle. Alright, and then the other poison that you should know about is vecuronium. And what this does is it's going to block this receptor right here, the nicotinic receptor. So what that means is well, if you're not going to get stimulated in the first place, you can't use your muscles. So it's going to keep you quiet, keep your muscles quiet, cannot contract. And this is you really see this in surgery rooms, where they kind of make it so you can't move during surgery. So this is a quick lecture on the poisons. That doesn't really matter, but you probably need to know it. I guess another thing that we can know is rigor mortis. And so what rigor mortis is what happens is there is no more ATP, and so if there's no more ATP, muscles cannot dissociate. Oh no, myosin. That's what I'm saying. Myosin cannot dissociate. So let's go back to the cross-bridge cycling. And so if we have rigor mortis, where is really when you see is really what you see when you die. You have no more energy, right? You have no more ATP. No more ATP. And so what this means is that this is blocked off. So what this means is your muscles will stay contracted, and well, eventually every muscle in your body will be contracted when you're dead. And that's it. That's what rigor mortis is. Alright, and now we can get to the interesting stuff. I'll straight up do a second page for this. Let's go through some graphs. some graphs. So velocity, force, velocity. Alright, so this is what a muscle looks like. Kind of like this. Man. There we go. So what's going to happen is this is kind of like it's like a theoretical application where you're moving your arm at like a top speed, say, but there's no force. This is really, this top like y-intercept here is like a theoretical kind of application, because there's always going to be force on you, so you can't really reach the y-intercept, but it exists. But down here with the x-intercept, you have, like, say it's 100 g's of force and 0 velocity. I don't even know what the unit is. I think it's fiber lengths per second. And so this is really what you see with isometric exercises, where you're using force but you're not moving your muscle. You're just constantly contracting. And so this is actually this exists. And so a lot of exercises, I guess, will be in this range. And so we'll go more in depth into this later, but this is a pretty important curve that you will need to know. Another curve that you'll probably need to know is the frequency, the force frequency curve. And so you're gonna have a relaxed state, and then whenever you get a stimulation, it's gonna bump it up. It's gonna bump it up. So your muscles first is relaxed. This is 0, and then maybe this is like 10, right? And so what you see is in unfused tetanus. So unfused tetanus is again like another theoretical kind of stimulation. But really what's going on is you're getting a stimulation, and then you're resting a little bit, and then you're getting another stimulation. You're resting for a little bit, and then you're getting another stimulation, and then another stimulation, and another stimulation. So you're not resting fully completely, because if that were to happen, you'd be like this, right? You'd be going back to 0 every single time. But what you see with an unfused tetanus is, again, is a theoretical application. Is you're getting a stim here, and then you're resting for a little bit. You get a stim, 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 after a little bit of rest each time. What's more common is a fused tetanus. This is what your muscles really look like. And so what it's going to do is it's just going to go straight up and like that. So you're going to have constant stimulation the entire time. So like, I could just straight up just color this, and because you're really just getting constant stimulation. So this is what the force frequency curve is. So force frequency. This is a not too important of a curve, but you're probably going to need to know it. Another curve that you'll need to know is Ca2 plus concentration and force. So this is a force calcium curve, and so what's going to happen is if you have no calcium, you're going to have no force, right? Because without calcium, you cannot start contracting, right? And so what you see with forced calcium curves is kind of looks like this, where despite, even if you have infinite amount of calcium, like this could go as far as possible, right, into the next page even, you will not ever reach higher than whatever the plateau is. Because, well, at here, or even at here, all the troponins are saturated. And therefore, there's no point in having more calcium. So more calcium doesn't even mean anything. So let me see if I can precision here. And this is a pretty important one, but this is kind of what it means. So, right, as you increase calcium, more you're going to generate some more force, right? And then eventually it's going to spike because you're going to reach enough calcium, and then it's going to plateau because all the troponins are saturated. So that's what you're going to see. Last kind of graph that you're going to see is called the L length, fiber length, and force. And so what this is going to look like is it's going to look kind of like this, kind of like a bell shape. And so if this is 0% length and this is like 100% length, you're gonna have the most length at like maybe 50, right? I don't exactly know the numbers, but this, like there's a middle point. So maybe it's like 50, like maybe it's like 45 to 60, maybe. Don't quote me on it, but there's like a middle point where you get the peak force. And so this is called LO. Or I think of it as length optimal. So this is the optimal length where you're generating the most force. And so think of it like this, right? You're starting your bicep curl and you're starting the weight here, whereas you're starting the weight here. So you only need to do this, whereas you have to do this, and you have to do, let's see, like this, right? And so what this means is that at this length, actually no, bicep curl is a bad example. Let's look at like a better lift, like a bench press, right? So this is the bar, right? And so you're gonna have your plates, on the side. And so this means is that if your hands are here, right, actually like super close grip, you're not gonna get optimal force from your chest. So you're not gonna get optimal force from your chest. Whereas if you were to, I erased his face. No. So if you were to lift all the way over here, you're over here on the curve. So you're again also not going to get the optimal force on your chest or from your chest. What you want is a nice middle ground where you see it's right here, and then you get the optimal force. And so this is what this like all these curves mean, and this is the fiber length curve, and I think this is probably the more important ones. This one's pretty important as well, and this one's pretty important, and we'll actually come back to that as I continue the video. And so, oh wait, I forgot to say, there's one more thing about this. And so as you as you lengthen the muscle, though, there's another thing that's working, and so this is called titin. So there's another protein in the muscle, and so I think of it like if you're stretching a muscle too much, you're gonna feel a little bit of pain, right? And so at 100%, you're gonna feel like the tension from something called passive tension. So titin is passive tension. So again, if we go back to the bench press example, what you're gonna see is if you're holding the bar like this, your chest is gonna be so stretched out that it's gonna feel some tension from something called passive tension from titin. And so ideally you want to be at here, so you're not going to feel really as much pain at all. And yeah, I think that's all I need to say about titin. What else do I need to say about titin? I think that's it. Okay. Sorry, I'm kind of sick right now. And so that is all I will say about titin. And so now we have to talk about fatigue, or muscle fatigue rather. And so there's two kinds of fatigue. There's high intensity, and then there's the endurance. And so if you're with high intensity, right, you're gonna feel something called metabolite buildup. And so this is a buildup of hydrogen, phosphate, ADP, magnesium, potassium, etc. There's a lot of trash. I want to say trash. It's like unwanted stuff that's keeping you from lifting like optimally. And so what this does is this is going to inhibit or create issues with calcium release, which will affect the calcium force curve, CAVS. And so if it's going to inhibit or create issues with the calcium force curve, what do you think it's going to do? It's going to reduce the force, and therefore, you know, you're going to, like, this is like the fatigue, right? You're not going to be able to lift as heavy as you want to. And with endurance fatigue, what you're going to see is fuel issues, right? You've been running for a long time. You're not going to have much ATP left. And so what you're going to see is you're going to have to run into fuel issues. So no more ATP, or not enough ATP, or not enough stuff to make ATP. So then you're gonna burn muscle to create glucose, which is weird. Like, I don't know why it doesn't burn fat, but I wish it was. Anyways, then we're gonna have the leaky ryanodine receptor, and that it's gonna just continue just like binding to anything. It's gonna bind to everything. Ca2 plus. There's too much like calcium in the cell, so it's gonna bind to anything that it sees. So this is where I guess kind of the metabolite builds up comes in, where you're gonna have calcium is gonna bind to phosphate, gonna bind to other things that will degrade the actin-myosin. This is called is where you see like muscle damage or like soreness. And like a good like kind of rule of thumb is that the increase in hydrogen is going to decrease, so increase hydrogen is going to decrease the velocity, and then you're going to have phosphate, increase phosphate is going to decrease force. This is going to affect the hydrolysis, and this is going to affect calcium. It's straight up going to bind it, so it's going to make Ca3PO4 2. It's going to make calcium phosphate, and that is no good for the muscles. And so now this is when the graphs kind of come in. The graphs, if we look at the forced calcium curve, right? This is the normal graph. Control, and then what we're going to see with fatigue is it's going to look like this. And so what's going on is, right, phosphate's going to decrease the force because it's binding to calcium, right? And so you're going to have less calcium in the muscles, and so despite like the fact that you're gonna saturate the, like, there's gonna be less calcium available for the muscle, so it's just gonna create less force. Decreased peak force, decreased calcium sensitivity, and it's going to take even more calcium to get to the point where you need to be. Because if you look right here, you just need this amount. Say this is like 20, right? You need 20 to get to the max force in a normal curve, whereas this is like, let's say it's like 50. You need 50, while this is already like 30 past, right? And this is what you're going to see with the forced calcium curve when you're fatigued. And then another curve that's pretty important is the velocity force curve, VF. So it's like a normal curve. You're going to see with the velocity it's going to be worse, right? So, right, metabolite buildup, straight up, you see increased velocity, increased hydrogen, increased phosphate. That's what the metabolite buildup is. Again, metabolite buildup, when you're fatigued, you're going to build up H and P, which directly affect velocity and force, right? You're going to see that in this graph. That's it for fatigue, really. And now we're going to talk about muscle types. And so there's three kinds of fibers. There's type 1, type 2A, 2X. Is the the slow, medium, fast. And we're gonna see, I think this is really what matters. And I guess we can also talk about units, motor units. And so what motor units are is just like a neuron and all the muscle fibers that it activates. And so for a type 1 kind of fiber, motor unit has some fibers. And for both these units, the motor unit has a lot more fibers. What you're going to see is, for example, if this is 10, this is going to have like 30 or like 20 to 30, right? Or even more. But like what I'm trying to say is the type 1 fiber has a few, whereas the type 2s are going to have more. And something that's, I guess, important is that we're going to see with strength training is you're going to turn the 2 A's to the 2 X's. Strength training turns the 2A into 2 X's, and also it's going to slightly increase the force, whereas endurance training will slightly decrease force. And this is like two kind of details that you might need to know, but again are pretty cool. And so let's go back to the curves. So if we look at the force velocity curve, if this is a type 1 fiber, this is what let me label the axes so you don't get confused. Is a type 1 fiber, the green is going to look more like this. So if we're assuming that the fibers are same length, then they're going to have equal force. But again, if we look at the type 2s, right? If we look at the type 2s have significantly more velocity compared to type 1. But again, they're going to meet at the same x-intercept, which is the same force. Another thing you're going to see is that in what other curves are important here? LO doesn't matter. The calcium, the force curve for calcium, and so it's type 1, this is type 2. Type 2, they're pretty much the same. It's just this is like kind of steeper, but I doubt that this is really too important. And yeah, this is pretty much it for the fiber types and the graphs. And then if we're going to look at the motor units, this is important because if we're going to look at the motor units, right, it's going to look like this. and then the graph for the type 2s are going to look a lot bigger. So 2 and this is 1. So remember, the amount of fiber lengths that you have, or the amount of fibers that you have, is equivalent to the amount of force you're about to produce. So remember how I said that type 1s, say they're going to have like 10, these are going to have like 30 or like 40, right? And so if we're talking about motor units, we're saying like if this is like 100 grams of force, this is going to be 300, because, well, it's going to have 3 times the amount of motor units. It's going to have that many more motor units, and because of that, it's also going to be faster because there's more motor units, right? And so that's what you're going to see really with motor units. That's really all you really need to know about the motor units. Is just that just need to be careful when they're asking questions comparing motor units versus fibers, and that's very important. So just read the question. And then the way that like the fibers are used, it's used as the slow one first, 2A, and then 2B, or 2X. So it's going to use the slow ones first, then the mediums, and this one. It's just because, well, you want to use the least amount of energy first, right? So if you use the I-axis or the 2-axis too fast, right, you're just going to spend all your energy. So what your body wants to do is want to use a little bit of energy, and it says, oh, okay, this is harder than it needs to be, or this is harder than it actually is, and they're going to start using the type 2As, and then it's also going to start using the type 2Xs. And then lastly, we're just going to talk very quickly about aging. And I think everyone knows that as you age, you're going to lose muscle. And you're just going to lose, really, for the most part, lose type 2 muscles. Right? And so what you can do is, well, strength train to mitigate the losses. And yeah, that's really all that's important about my muscle, the muscles. And also, if you see a question talking about the calcium transient just means the amount of calcium in the cytosol. So say, for example, if right now there is 0 excitation from the motor unit, or from the motor neuron, the calcium transient within the cytosol is going to be 0. There's nothing in there because all of it is in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, right? But then once we do have the motor neuron sending signals, right, doing the entire thing, the ryanodine receptor is going to release calcium, and now the concentration of calcium is going to be high now because, well, the ryanodine receptor is releasing calcium, and that is what it means by calcium transient. that's important for like solving problems. And yeah, that's it for this video.